Dear guests, what a pleasure to welcome you today here for the 9th Cohesion Forum, the biggest high-level political event for cohesion policy. 1,000 delegates, representatives of all member states, of the regions and cities of Europe, EU institutions, social and economic partners, academics, and civil society, not forgetting representatives from the candidate countries. Welcome to all of you. The previous Cohesion Forum took place 2 years ago. We were just starting to recover from the social and economic impacts of the pandemic. But Russia had just launched the war against Ukraine. So today, while we feel well on track to be recovering from the COVID-19 crisis, the war is far from over. In fact, the geopolitical situation is worsening. And the long-term challenges remain. Now we have a triple transition: green, digital, and demographic. In this context, cohesion policy is needed more than ever. The debate on its future was launched at the last Cohesion Forum. These last 2 years, we have collected a wide range of inputs. And fresh from the press, you now have the 9th Cohesion Report. This draws together the discussion so far, feeding it with the latest statistical data and economic analysis. Our heartfelt thanks to all of you who contributed your ideas, your knowledge, your expertise. But your work is not yet done, because today we must take this debate to the next level. This is a unique opportunity, bringing together from across Europe the richness of your respective experience from the ground. The list of speakers for these 2 days is impressive. We are grateful for your readiness to join us. So without further ado, let us hear from the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who will set the scene for a very promising debate on the future of EU's largest investment policy. The video message, please.
Distinguished guests, welcome to the 9th Cohesion Forum in Brussels. And welcome to everyone who is joining from across Europe. Territorial, social, and economic cohesion is a promise. The promise that all Europeans are equal. The commitment that all European regions can give their citizens equal opportunities. That all member states can thrive in the prosperity of our single market, and that Europe acts in solidarity. This is what cohesion policy is designed for. Long-term investments in the connectivity, the resilience, and the social fabric of Europe's regions. Like the port tunnel in Dublin, which handles half of Ireland's trade, or the Alqueva Dam in Portugal, the largest strategic water reserve in Western Europe, or the new data and supercomputer center in Greece, powered by solar energy. It brings new jobs and investment to regions formerly dependent on coal mining or other industries in transition. It helps lift people out of poverty and provides training to keep skills up to date. Each year, over 10% of government investment in the European Union is cohesion funding. In member states that are catching up with the European average, cohesion funds represent over half of their public investment. And we see the results. The income per person in the countries that joined our union in 2004 has grown from about half of the EU average to almost 80% of it today. Jobs were created. Families are better off. In Poland, for example, European funds have recently opened over 1,000 new childcare places, supporting the promise of equality also for working parents. Cohesion policy has adapted to new circumstances with solidarity. And this is especially true in the last 4 years. And this is my second point. Together, we have faced a pandemic, a war, and an energy crisis. each of these challenges was asymmetrical. Some member states and regions were hit harder than others. The capacity to respond was varied. But each time, the built-in flexibility of cohesion policy and historic innovations like Next Generation EU allowed us to respond decisively. When European regions were hit by COVID-19, we bundled our resources and pulled each other up. Thanks to the recovery assistance for cohesion and our powerful Next Generation EU, Europe's economy bounced back quickly. When Russia's brutal invasion tore millions of Ukrainian women and children from their homes, we again came with quick and workable solutions. Our CARE program supported European regions and cities to help up to 5 million Ukrainians get shelter in Europe. And when Putin tried to blackmail us with fossil fuels, because we stood up for Ukraine's freedom, we did not feel the cold. And our SAFE program helped the most vulnerable families and companies in Europe to overcome the energy shock. Today, homegrown and affordable renewable energy is booming, also thanks to the hard work of regional and local officials across Europe. Our union gives regions and cities the extra boost they need to pull themselves up. This solidarity gives me confidence in the future of our union. Now is the moment to reflect on how we can fortify our growth model and build an even more inclusive Europe. How we can modernize and reinforce cohesion in our union. That's why I am grateful that a reflection on the future of cohesion policy has already begun. In February, a high-level group has published its views. At least 20 member states have organized debates. And European institutions, including the Economic and Social Committee and the Committee of the Regions, have adopted opinions. Some ideas are already emerging. For example, the need to involve partners on the ground, to accelerate delivery, and to link reforms to investments. In a nutshell, how to reduce administrative burden and maximize impact. Because we have all seen how the demands are increasing. But if we keep innovating, modernizing, and pulling each other up, we Europeans will continue to realize the promise of a more equal union. I wish you a successful forum, and I look forward to continuing our work together. Thank you very much.
A couple of minutes ago, I spoke about how this forum brings together a variety and richness of experience on the ground. Our next speaker is a rare example that combines academic research, hands-on management of the policy on the ground, who has been minister a couple of times, member of the National Parliament, member of the European Parliament, and more. She has seen the policy from all its facets like nobody else, I think. And I believe her passion for the policy is no secret to anyone in this room. Please help me welcome Commissioner Elisa Ferreira, Commissioner for Cohesion and Reforms.
Well, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Themis, for this introduction, but she's my friend, you know. So, and you are most welcome to this 9th Cohesion Forum. This is, in fact, an important moment, and I think the President of the Commission just referred to it. It is an important moment for economic, social, and political cohesion in Europe. A moment of change. A moment of change from a structural and transformative nature. Political change, with elections coming soon. Economic change, of course, with the well-known triple transition: climate, digital, demographic. Policy change, as we reflect together on reforms needs of an enlarged union. Time is ripe for a serious discussion informed by evidence on the European Union's economic development, and the two things are almost the same: the future of cohesion policy. The future of cohesion policy and the economic development of Europe have got to be together. And a few weeks ago, I met the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, and we talked about several things, about various forms of cooperation. But at the end of the meeting, she said something that I wanted to share with you. She said, "You, Europe, give us hope. Europe is why we carry on." And when I met a couple of minutes ago high-level representatives of Moldova, I think we can all share this kind of feeling. Because, dear friends, in the discussions of programs and policies, of practicalities, preconditions, let us not lose sight of this foundational truth of the European project. This European project, our project, is a project of hope. And this is why we carry on. The European Union was founded on the key principle, more important than ever, I think, that nations should come together, not by force, but by choice. And that what happened to one country, one region, is a concern for all of us. This is why cohesion policy is so fundamental to the European project. And Jacques Delors expressed it better than anyone else, with all his experience and with all his hindsight. He said, every time we deepened the European project or enlarged it, we had to reinforce cohesion policy. And that's the kind of recipe that brought us up to here, and that will have to be, again, put up front in our agenda to help us to move forward. Why did he say this? Because economic, monetary, and political integration, all these policies, among all the other things that we harmonize, but they impact asymmetrically the different territories. And we cannot, as policy and decision makers, rely on market forces to ensure an automatic, fair distribution of the benefits of this huge market with all the extra mobilities inside. It's capital, it's people, it's workers. But this doesn't create naturally, at least in the medium term, any sort of natural rebalancing. So we need a public policy. We need regional development policy. We need a stimulus that helps the weakest ones to face this strong challenge of playing their assets, playing their capacities in an open and very competitive market, so that citizens of every place, country, region, or city can feel and benefit from integration. However, this is not simply about a static redistribution of income. It is about balanced growth, development, economic and social development. It is about designing policies that guarantee, at the same time, efficiency and equity. One cannot exist without the other. And this is, in fact, the true raison d'être. The reason, the justification for cohesion policy is, in fact, to ensure the cohesive, the balanced development of the Union. Cohesion is thus fundamental to our European project. It is a precondition for our unity. And again, to quote Jacques Delors, with this in mind, let's us carry on let us carry on outlining a couple of achievements of the policy, and then how we can evolve, how we can help the policy to face the new challenges of the future. So my first topic as a stimulus to our future debate that will follow immediately is in fact to share or recall something that we all know. In fact, cohesion policy works. And when we are publishing now the 9th cohesion report, it has been approved 2 weeks ago, and it is, the public sharing is exactly today. This report mobilizes a wealth of such evidence, but I would just underline 2 or 3 aspects. One of them is, in fact, what the President of the Commission just mentioned. We are now celebrating the 20th anniversary of one of the most challenging enlargements of the European Union, the one that followed 2004. And when we look ahead to the new enlargement, we have better take the lessons from the previous one. And in fact, as the President mentioned, from half of the wealth per capita of Europe, that's where in 2004, these new members that are not new anymore, but more recent enlargement members, from this level of half of the European GDP, they are now with an average of 80%. And this is really figures, this is evidence. Their economic development increased not only their competitiveness, but the competitiveness and resilience of the whole of the European Union. For the richer, wealthier areas of Europe, this meant, and some of the ones that are sitting here know it, it meant new customers, it meant new investment opportunities, new producers, diversified supply chains. The single market, with this enlargement, and because cohesion policy helped these regions to grow faster, the single market expanded, it deepened. And we are all of us Europeans, better off because of this. This was, in fact, to a great extent, the consequence of cohesion policy. And also, there has been a substantial reduction, if you want another kind of indicator, the number of European citizens living in less developed countries. So I'm talking about countries that have on average less than 75% of the European average, was 25% of the overall population in the year 2000. 25%, a quarter of the population lived in low development countries. In 2023, this percentage was only 5%. So this is really a massive change. And this is a story of success, a true win-win for all of us. And this is the story of cohesion policy. No wonder that the World Bank describes Europe as a convergence machine, with cohesion policy as its engine, as its motor. And the work continues, and in fact, the 9th cohesion report confirms that support of cohesion policy funding between 2014 and the end of this period, so 2027, this is an estimate, will help to create more than 1 million new jobs across Europe, and the overall wealth of Europe will grow by 1% extra due to this impact. But this impact, of course, is considerably higher in countries that benefit from a higher proportion of support, the ones that need support, that cannot help themselves. And Croatia's GDP, for instance, will be 8% higher due to this support. Poland or Slovakia will be 6% higher, the income, exactly driven by the investment supported by the policy. The report talks about a lot of this, but also sets out the key role of cohesion policy during the past crisis. And in fact, again, the President mentioned it, but I will recall again, that the policy during crisis is often the biggest source of stability in the different regions and countries. The policy accounts on average for more than 10% of total public investment in the EU, but for certain member states, it can reach 51%, it can be even higher than this. Cohesion policy provided this stability also during the financial crisis. It is easy today. Now, we just came across successfully, I think, the COVID crisis. And when we compare the two crises, the 2008 and 2019 crisis, 19 COVID, 2008 financial crisis that followed with sovereign debt crisis, the crisis of 2008 for the weakest countries and regions took more than 11 years for these less developed regions to try to come back to where they were before the crisis. Whereas in 2019, in 2 years after the top year of the COVID attack, in fact, the two groups or three groups of regions, the poor ones, the intermediate ones, and the top ones, after 2 years, after 2019, they were back at the level where they were before, on average, of course. So this is the proof that when we had to use cohesion funding, and we used more with more than 23 billion euros that member states decided to reallocate to tackle the COVID impact, it worked. It worked while at the same time we're preparing, of course, REACT-EU, Next Generation and all that. But the immediate impact was, in fact, to give emergency support, and so this flexibility worked. So this is just an example that comes together with everything else that we did, and that was also mentioned in the initial speech by the President, with the refugees from Ukraine and with, for instance, the increase of the energy prices as a reaction to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Now, okay, the policy works. We have success stories to tell. Is everything done? It isn't, and Temis was just referring to that. So let's look at the future. Let's see what we can improve. And in fact, this is the moment where we have got really to see very clearly how we can improve things. And the best way to do it is, in fact, to try to create a vision of where we are. And for this, I would just ask Marta to put in one slide that I think is really very telling. One of the first information that we get is, in fact, when we see, and look just please at the left one, when it is very pink, it's not that positive. That means the pinkish it is, the lower the level of development. And then we'll address the second one, but in fact, we still have lots of imbalances. This is a static approach, a basic static approach, based on GDP per capita, so the most standard indicator. And this shows that we still have regions with massive problems of development, some of them, and I call the attention for instance, for the outermost regions that are physically, graphically very small, they are in the corner, but some of them still lag a lot of basic infrastructures, basic public services, lots of very essential needs. Generally, you see that, in fact, when we have the dark pink, it means that these regions are below 75% of the average. If you have green, and the greenish it is, the stronger the economy of these regions. So, what we see by looking now at the other side, the right-hand side of the graph, you see the dynamic in these regions. And the greener it is, the more quickly they are catching up. The higher the level, the average growth during 20 years. The yellowish and the darker the yellow, the more sluggish, the more stable or depressing is the growth in these regions. So this shows you, in a nutshell, the problems we still have to face. And this also tells you that in some of these countries that are on regions that are catching up, they still have a lot of internal imbalances. And they are growing on the basis of a lot of internal imbalances. This due to what we can call a suction effect, where more developed areas kind of hoover up, as you see here, also at the European level, in an internal market. They hoover up the highest performance companies, more sophisticated technologies, the best job opportunities, the best education, the best research, the best innovation. But sometimes these kind of imbalances are also due to inadequate territorial development strategies. We must learn to better combine the different strengths of large cities, mid-sized cities, small towns, and rural areas. Otherwise, we create very unintended impacts across Europe and even inside member states. All these different urban centers have a place. They have their place. They have their role to play. And we have got to understand it. In addition, many regions, because a lot of policies impact on these and determine these trends, many regions have been stuck since the financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis, that really for certain countries introduced a big retraction in the economy, but also in the instruments that can foster the growth. And if you see here, one of these elements, that is the capital, gross fixed capital formation, you see the difficulty in catching up for those that are sitting behind. The grayish line, the bottom line, is the south. The orange line on top is the northwest of Europe. And the bluish line in the middle is the eastern. And then the dotted lines are international comparisons with the USA, the OECD, and the European average, that is the thickest dotted line in the middle. Many regions, in fact, and this was shown in the previous slide, many regions, as you see, have been stuck, particularly since the financial crisis, without growing. And around a third of the European regions, home to 150 million people, still have not come back to the pre-2008 level of GDP, so of this crisis. As the 9th Cohesion report shows, these regions can be found all across Europe. So there are stagnant regions at the different level. Regions that were over 100% and that didn't grow or stopped growing or went down. Regions, transition regions that stopped growing, and also the underdeveloped regions or less developed regions that really are not managing to find a recipe to catch up and to get out of this sluggish kind of development. So many of these trapped regions often are very also correlated with all sorts of weaknesses. And the Cohesion report sets out many of these weaknesses. Economic weaknesses such as low productivity, associated also with low investment, lack of innovation, and something that we find very, very important, that is brain drain. So when there is no growth in a region, when the region is becoming very old, when there is no capacity to retain the young and the more qualified, give them job opportunities, create conditions for their families to settle, we have brain drain. And this is, when it is red, it is a sign of danger, that people are leaving, Often they live to the most developed area in the country, but then often they leave the country as a whole and they go somewhere else. So brain drain is an issue, and this tells you the regions that lost a lot of population already. These are the red ones, the red areas, qualified people, young people in working age. And when you have this orange color, that is a sign of alert that they are starting to bleed. So these low growth regions, that in fact I just, combining this chart with the other one, all this is in the report, is something that we really have to address. So in a nutshell, we have static problems, the level of development, and we have the capacity to stimulate growth, to stimulate development, with, of course, requiring, of course, different recipes for the different problems that the different regions have. But it is also important to note that when a region stagnates for a long time, and we were talking in the other initial chart on the right side, regions that stagnated for 20 years, gradually you start having fewer opportunities, worse prospects. Parents see their children going away, not having a chance. This is very disturbing of the social, economic, cultural fabric, but also has very serious political consequences. And research shows that every year a region is stuck or falls into a kind of recessionary track. It is more likely that this region, or in these regions, citizens will start to move into the poison of political discontent. And if you look again at the maps, and later on you can do it, of course, you can probably identify some of the worries and fears that are feeding the feeling of being out or unable to move forward in this complex, globalized, digital world in which you feel that there is no place for you. And this is one of the poisons that, in fact, we have got to look at and completely create the antidotes for that. And the antidote is very clear. We have got to work with the regions, with the cities, to escape the traps and to build the basis of a successful future. The antidote, of course, it requires support, money, but more than money, it requires local engagement by the local partners, and we have here researchers. We are also always asking them, and I look at Professor Jan Marino, and I don't know if Professor Andrés Rodrigues Poza is already here, but we are asking all these researchers to help the politicians to, in fact, understand where are the triggers for the development across the huge variety of European regions. European support, in fact, has got to be tailored to the regional and local conditions at all levels of development, identifying their strengths, unleashing their potential, overcoming the bottlenecks. The strongest support for, of course, those places with the least means to support themselves, but also a different kind of support to the middle-income places to help them not to fall in these traps, and the traps have been identifying with a lot of other aspects that will be developed later on in the other panels by the academic people here, and also the more developed areas so that, in fact, they build on their strengths and they carry the rest of the economy with them. More knowledge, more research, supportive of a competent and detailed, tailor-made territorial development agenda is needed. Very quickly, second and third topics. The second topic I would like to exchange with you is we need new methods of delivery, new investment tools. We now have digital sectors and instruments. We have biotechnology. We need to raise productivity levels, and we have to reduce Europe's strategic dependency, but all the territories can participate, they can contribute. we don't know. We have got to create resilience. We don't know what the future will bring in terms of unforeseen crises, as we didn't anticipate COVID, for instance. But two global trends are already there. One is aging, demographic problems. The other one is climate. And the impact of climate on this, we benefited from research from Joint Research Center. And you have here just a hint of the expectations that we have to prepare for when we decide how to use the cohesion funding that is available. So, new and simpler delivery methods, streamlined, user-friendly, a greater focus on performance. Yes, we have got to get inspiration from the Recovery and Resilience Facility, to target, to pay against deliver, to remove bureaucracy, but bearing always in mind that we cannot just copy-paste from elsewhere. Methods must be adapted to the specific needs and the identity, namely the place-based approach of cohesion policy. I know we can do this because since its creation, cohesion policy has been able to adapt. But we cannot, in this adaptation, lose the DNI long-term perspective, development perspective of cohesion policy. The third set of messages that I share with you relates to the spirit of partnership, the energy, the ideas that have got to be identified and stimulated at the regional and local level. And in this, I think administrative capacity is really crucial, the quality of the institutions. And that's why we care so much through the technical support instrument to help regions and countries and local entities, in fact, to improve their capacity to deliver and to identify needs and blocking elements. Also, I would like to underline that we have very good examples. We are just, doing this event, and at the same time, New European Bauhaus is in the Cinquantenaire, also showing what we can do using the energy, the imagination of people, of local people. We have the just transition plans, but additionally, we have got to incorporate more cohesion policy in instruments such as the European semester and other recommendations that really touch upon the capacity to deliver the right policies at the territorial level. So, having said this, I would also like to underline another aspect, that is the cohesion objective cannot be just a task for cohesion policy. First of all, we need that member states give it a very high priority when they define their development strategies, but we also need other policies, the innovation and research policy, the education policy, the infrastructure policy, to take into account the territorial impact of what is decided. I already spoke too much. The floor will be yours. But to close, I would like to recall that I started with the message that the European project and cohesion policy are projects of hope and transformation. And that is why we carry on. Today and tomorrow, we will no doubt discuss many technical issues. But I encourage all of you in every discussion to remember that cohesion policy is hope turned into action. When we discuss convergence, development traps, smart specialization, we are turning hope into action. The hope that young families can build a better life and flourish wherever they live, as Enrico Letta has been verbalizing it in a very interesting way, the right to move, but also the right to stay. When we discuss strategic investments, streamlining, and performance orientation, we are turning hope into action. The hope that every part of Europe will participate in our green and digital future when they implement their development strategy, forgetting no one, wherever the person is. And when we discuss new forms of partnership and reforms and capacity, we are turning again hope into action. The hope that local partners will have the capacity, will be able to take their destiny in their hands. This is the essence of our European model. These are our values. Let us carry them into the programs. Let us carry them into the future of the policy. Let us carry them into the next stages of European integration. Let there be no doubt, cohesion policy remains a prerequisite for a lasting and thriving union. Our task is to turn in this objective, this dream, this hope into action. So I look forward to your discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner.